Hello, my dear students of class 7, and welcome back to another class with me, your tutor, Atsinyo Sekose, and this tutoring is coming from the Directorate of School Education, Nagaland. So today, we are going to continue with our lesson, that is, The Ashes That Made Trees Bloom by William Elliot Griffiths. This is the part 2. In our previous class, to give a short rewind or recapitulation, we have learned that there lived very two kind old people who are very kind and considerate, and they were rewarded for their kindness, they were rewarded by their dog, and we learned that they also become very rich. But we also learned that there are two wicked couple who borrowed their magical mortar and mill, remember? And what did they do to that? In order to make gold for themselves, they tried it, but instead they got worms. So out of anger, they chopped it down into bits and pieces, and they started to use it for firewood. So that's where we stopped in our previous class, and we are wondering what is going to happen to this magical mortar and mill. Remember, our topic is about the ashes that made trees bloom. So I'm sure from there you will be able to, connect the dots, thinking that I'm sure it has something to do with ashes. So now our magical mill and mortar is now burned down into ashes. So I think this is where we are going to find out what exactly happened in the second part of our story. So if you would turn to page 60, our second part of the story is on page 60, and we have here some new words. I will not be repeating the footnotes that are found in your text, so I would like you to note these down as we go along. So the first footnote that we have, or new words that we have in our first paragraph, part 2, is the word withered. What does withered mean? It means a leafless or a dying plant or trees, all right? Then number 2, we have blaze, which means burning fire. And in paragraph 7, you will find impertinence. What does impertinence mean? Impertinence means rudeness, all right? Then number 4, same paragraph, prostrate. What does prostrate mean? Prostrate here in our text, it means lying down flat, or we can also say kneeling down out of respect for someone, all right? Then we have procession. I'm sure you are familiar with what is a procession, but a procession is when a number of people are walking in an orderly fashion or in an orderly manner. So that is procession. In paragraph 8, you will find the word competent. What does competent means? Competent here is referring to a smart leader, all right? Then number 7, we have the word gleefully. I'm sure you know what it means. When we say glee, we mean it is happy. So gleefully here is an adjective, and if in another word for gleefully is, the synonym is happily. So that's what we mean here. Then in paragraph 11, point number 8, we have the word pomp. What does it mean? I'm sure again you are familiar with this. It means splendid display. So when we are celebrating, just think about maybe a birthday celebration of yours, and you decorated your home with lots of things, that itself is a pomp display, a splendid display. So that's what we mean here. Number 9 is the word ditch. Now we all know what is a ditch, but sometimes we refer to it as drainage, all right? So ditch and drainage means the same thing again. Now number 10, dwelt. Here it means stay or live. So those are some of the synonyms. We have learned about what are synonyms, so I'm just pointing it out again to remind you. So these are some new words that we would be coming across, and now we would move on to the story, that is the part 2 story of The Ashes That Made Trees Bloom. And in our part 2, in the first paragraph, we learned that remember, in our previous class, or in our previous part 1, we learned that the mill was being burned as firewood. So now In the second part, we learned that the old man dreamt again about that dog, his dear beloved dog that was killed. Now, in his dream, the spirit of the dog spoke to him again. And what does he say? Telling him how the wicked people had burned the mill made from the pine tree. So he reported in that way, and he told the owner that take the ashes of the mill, sprinkle them on the withered trees, and they will bloom again. So he told his owner to go and take the ashes of that burned down mill and collect it. So the next day, in the second paragraph, the old man awoke and went at once to his wicked neighbor's house, where he found the miserable old pair sitting at the edge of their square fireplace. And the old fellow was smoking and spinning, and from time to time they were trying to warm their hands by the fireplace, sitting by the fireplace. So, and he went and requested them. He found that some bits of the mill, while behind them lay a pile of broken pieces. Some bits of it still remained. In the next paragraph, we learned that the good old man humbly, I want you to underline that word humbly. Remember, it is his mortar and mill, and yet he went over to his neighbor's place, the two wicked neighbors' place, and asked them humbly, asked for the ashes. Though the covetous couple, we have already learned what is covetous, so it means greedy. The two greedy couple turned up their noses at him and scolded him as if he were a thief. We have the phrase there, turned up their noses. What does it mean? Treated him with contempt, which means, contempt here means ill-treated him as though he is beneath them, all right? So that is the treatment that these two wicked people are giving to this old, kind-hearted fellow. And see, that is the extent of their wickedness. That's what we see here. And he collected it, filled it in a basket, and he left. On coming home, the old man took his wife into the garden. So remember, the spirit of the dog has told him to go collect it and sprinkled it over the tree, the barren tree, or we can say withered tree here. It being winter, remember it is during the winter season, and we all know that during the winter season what we usually notice is that the trees are barren. In other words, the trees appear to be withering, leafless, and so on. Their favorite cherry tree was bare, so it was bare, which means there is no leaves. It looks as though it is dying. He sprinkled a pinch of ashes on it, and lo, it sprouted blossoms until it became a cloud of pink blooms which perfumed the air. So that's what happened. It still has that magical power, even in the ashes. So when he sprinkled it over their favorite cherry tree, it started to be covered in rich pink colored blossoms, which means flowering. The news of this filled the village. The news of this filled the village, and everyone ran out to see the wonder. So see, again they're sharing their happiness, again sharing with their neighbors. Now, what happened to the two wicked people, the covetous couple? Also heard the story, and gathering the remaining ashes of the mill, kept them to make withered trees blossom. So see, they are very greedy and selfish. They also put some of the ashes aside so that they can also turn trees into blossom themselves. Now, in the next paragraph, the kind old man, hearing that his lord, the daimyo, remember we are talking about a Japanese tale, and daimyo, it is during the time of daimyo who was reigning, that is in the 19th century. So this, let's say the emperor or the daimyo was coming along the road of this village. So when the kind old man heard about it, he also went along, set out to see him, taking his basket of ashes. As the train approached, he climbed up into an old withered cherry tree that stood by the wayside. So that's what he did. Now, he is not doing this to impress the daimyo. We can keep that noted. And in the next paragraph, we learned that now in the days of the daimyos, it was the custom, which means it was the tradition when their lord passed by for all the loyal people to shut up their high windows. What are they supposed to do? They are supposed to close all doors and windows and pasted a piece of or a slip of paper so as to show their respect and so as not to commit any impertinence, which means not to commit any rudeness on their part. So that's what people do. All the people along the road would fall upon their hands and knees. Remember, prostrate there. So they would prostrate themselves, kneel down when the procession passed. We already know what is a procession. So usually a daimyo is always traveling in a very elaborate manner, in a very dainty manner, we can also say, with a lot of pomp, okay? So here he is also accompanied by a lot of people. So they were walking or driving past by in a carriage, we can also say, in a very orderly, fashionable manner. So when the train drew near, one tall, competent man, probably one of the leader who is leading that march or that procession, crying out to the people by the way, "Get down on your knees, get down on your knees." And everyone knelt down while the procession was passing. But remember, our kind-hearted old fellow is climbing up a tree. So what happened here? Suddenly, the leader of the van caught sight of the aged man up in the tree. He was about to call out to him in an angry tone. He was about to do that. But what happened? Seeing he was such an old fellow, he pretended, you may want to underline that, he pretended not to notice him and passed him by. So see, he was again very lucky, probably because he's a very kind person. So when the daimyo's palanquin, we already know what is a palanquin there, you can refer to your footnote, royal van or cart, that's why we are saying it's probably a carriage. When the daimyo's palanquin drew near, the old man, taking a pinch of ashes from his basket, scattered it over the tree, and what happened? It has magical power, right? So in a moment, it burst into blossom. So remember, I'm sure you have noticed a cherry tree blossoming. In fact, just a few months back, we have witnessed that, and it's such a pretty sight, don't you think? So here it turned into the same thing. First, it was leafless and looking very dull, but when the ashes were sprinkled over it, it turned into pink blossom. So what happened? The delighted daimyo, which means the daimyo was very happy to see this sight, ordered the train to be stopped and got out to see the wonder. He was also amazed by it. And calling the old man to him, he thanked him. He thanked him and ordered presents of, you can underline these, silk robes, sponge cake, fans, and other rewards to be given him. So see, kind people always gets rewarded. You know, his intention was not to become rich, or his intention was not to show that he has magical power. It was not that, but he wanted to share how wonderful it is to see that cherry trees would start to bloom in winter. See, so when that happened, he was given very rich reward. You know, back then, silk robes and sponge cake and all these things are items of very expensive items, all right? So he was rewarded richly in this manner. He even invited him to his castle. So that was the case here. He even got an invitation to the castle, and not many people get an invitation to a castle, all right? So that was his reward. Now, in the next paragraph, what happened here? Did this kind old fellow jumped into the carriage and went along with the daimyo? No, but again, in order to share the good news, he went to his home, and the old man went gleefully, happily to his home to share his joy with his dear old wife. See, that is how considerate and kind he is. So he went to share the news, the happy news to his wife, but what is happening to the two greedy people here? But when the greedy neighbor heard of it, he also took some of the magic ashes and went out on the highway. Maybe he's also trying to do the same thing in order to impress and get reward like the kind old neighbor. There he waited until a daimyo's train came along, and instead of kneeling down, remember they are supposed to kneel down to show respect, instead of kneeling down like the crowd, he climbed a withered cherry tree. When the daimyo himself was almost directly under him, when the daimyo van, or we can say carriage, was directly under him, what did he do? He threw a handful of ashes over the tree, which did not change a particle. We already have what it means there, which did not change even a little bit. So now the wind blew the dust, the fine dust, in the noses and eyes of the daimyo and his wife. Imagine if you are being attacked with ashes, and these ashes, the dirty ashes gets into your eyes and nose, obviously you would get very angry, right? So in that same manner, they started to sneeze. The daimyo and his wife started to sneeze and choke. They could not breathe, in fact. It spoiled all the pomp and dignity of the procession. See, it was such a happy procession, in orderly manner. It was such a splendid display of procession, but these ashes ruined it all. So what happened? The man whose business it was to cry, the competent fellow here, "Get down on your knees," seized the old fool by the collar, dragged him from the tree, and tumbled him and his ash basket into the ditch by the road. So that was his treatment here, because he had done something so foolish. He was being dragged down from the tree and dragged into a ditch, into a so-called drainage here. Then beating him soundly, he also gave him a good beating. He left him for dead. That was his punishment. See, if we are not kind, and if we are always selfish, we usually meet such kind of tragic end. Thus, the wicked old man died in the mud. That's how he died. But the kind friend of the dog dwelt in peace and plenty. But what happened to the kind neighbor? They live in peaceful manner, and plenty here means they lived in a very great abundance of riches, all right? Remember, they were being rewarded with such great riches, and both he and his wife lived to a green old age, which means they lived a very healthy, happy, prosperous, active life. So that was their reward. And remember, in our previous class, we have also talked about the theme or the main idea in our story. Remember, the main thing that we can take from this lesson is that kindness, honesty, and hard work are always rewarded, no matter what. If you are kind, if you always think kind of other people, all right, whatever you do would be rewarded. But if you are selfish, if you do not want to work hard, then we usually meet tragic incidences like the two wicked people. So that is our moral of the story. Now, in a very quick manner, let's take a look at some of our questions here. On page 63, working with the text, answer the following questions. The old farmer is a kind person. What evidence of his kindness do you find in the first two paragraphs? Here we are having this question towards the end of our lesson. So first two paragraphs is referring to the first part of our story. You know what he did? What evidence of his kindness? Remember, he is always hardworking. He is always treating the dog as if it's his own child, and also he showed kindness to every creature. Remember, he would even turn up the sword and let the heron bird feed on the worms. See, those are some act of kindness that you will find. Number two, what did the dog do to lead the farmer to the hidden gold? What did it do? It started to motion, it started to scratch, and so on, right? So you can point those things out for your answer. Now, number three here, how did the spirit of the dog help the farmer first? How did it help him first? You would have to point it out in this manner, that the spirit of the dog helped, in the past tense, past participle in fact, helped the farmer first by appearing in his dream and telling him what to do, telling him that he should go and cut down the pine tree, and carved it into a mortar and a mill, right? So that's how you can point it out. How did he help him next? I'm sure you know the answer now, so I'll leave that to you. Why did the daimyos reward the farmer but punish his neighbor for the same act? That is in our question number 4. I'm sure you already know the answer to this. Remember, I said kindness is being rewarded, and if you are dishonest, if you are cruel, it also gets its own punishment. So you can put it in that way, all right? So on that note, we would be winding up today's class for this topic, that is the ashes that made trees bloom. And I hope you would go back and read your textbook thoroughly and then attempt the rest of the questions and answers. On that note, we will be winding up for today's class. Thank you all very much for joining me.